my mother became a dentist. But my grandmother and grandfather were very, very well-to-do. He had the biggest beer, not factory, beer, what do you call it, beer? Brewery. Beer brewery in Siberia, in all of Siberia. But he had horses, and so in the morning he would go and take care of his horses, and my grandmother is the one who ran everything, this giant brewery. And I don't see it on here now, but they told me that she always wore a big ring on a chain with keys on it, because she took care of this huge house and the brewery too, an amazing woman. And they had a very large house, and there were a lot of young Jewish people who came from other parts of Siberia, because that was the best university in all of Siberia, University of Tomsk. And so they had this large house, and they would check on some of the young Jewish people going to school and if they needed a place to stay, and so they gave them a place to stay. And my father, Jewish too, and he came from a very interesting background. His parents were dirt poor, and his father was a blacksmith. And Jewish people weren't farmers or blacksmiths ordinarily, but that's what his dad was. But his mother died when he was very young, and his father remarried and married a wonderful woman who realized this was a very bright kid. So she saved all her money and sent him to the university in Tomsk, which, as I said, had the best university in Siberia. And then my mother checked up to see who needed a home, a place to stay, and he did, because he came from a very poor family. And he came and stayed with him, and those two fell madly in love with each other. Take a look at them. And got married. But my grandmother insisted that my mother finish school, that she finished dental school, and my father finished, he was a scientist, but he also, to make a living, he finished pharmacy. And so they got married. And then he had a very successful pharmacy. As a matter of fact, I have to tell you this. When I went to Russia with Good Morning America, we went there and we went to that town. And then, I forget what it was, some big thing happened and we couldn't interview them, we had to come back. But, so we were having supper at the airport, and joining us was somebody from that town. And I was telling my story, and I said my father had a pharmacy in Omsk, and it was Brick. And he said, well, the sign is still there. Anyway.
Oh, wow.
So, but I've been back because when I worked for Good Morning America, they sent me from one end of the world to the other.
So when was your father sent to Manchuria?
Oh, I'm coming to it.
Sorry.
Anyway, so when the revolution started, I was born into the revolution, 1917, and about 3 years later, the revolution had started evolving, and Soviet Russia decided that they were at a stage now where they could reach out to other countries and have business with them. And so they decided they would start a Soviet-Chinese trade mission. And because my father was very, very bright and a scientist, they decided that he would go to Shanghai to start the trade mission. So he went and left my mother and my older sister and me in Siberia until he could get things organized. And about 6 months later, he sent for us. And did I tell you about the teplushka?
Yeah.
You know what a teplushka is? Oh no, in Russian means a warm place. So when he sent for us, there was still fighting. There was still fighting in 1919. And so we got a tipushka, which is like a caboose. And my mother packed her dental equipment and some paintings and things. Thank you very much.
Wow.
And so we got into the tipushka, which is like a caboose, and we had everything there, and off we went. And it took us forever and I didn't know that this was happening until years later. I asked my mother, there was a memory because I was only 3 at the time, that was bubbling up. And I asked her, I remembered that sometimes the train man would wave a white flag as we were going through an area, and other times he'd wave a red flag. And years later, when we visited, she was living in Brazil by that time, I said, I remembered something. You know how things bubble up? That when we were in that tipushka, 6 months crossing, sometimes a train man would wave a red flag and sometimes he'd wave a white flag. What was that all about? And she said, how could you remember that? How could you notice that at your age? I said, I don't know. But what was that? She said, well, the revolution was still going on in certain parts. And when the train was passing an area that was already in Soviet hands, they'd wave the red flag. And it was still in Tsarist hands, they waved the white flag.
Amazing.
It's an amazing story.
Amazing.
Anyway, I was 3 at the time.
When you arrived in
Mhm.
Shanghai. And when did you come to the U.S.?
1937. Now, I came in a very different way from the way you came.
Oh yes. Oh,
Very.
yes.
The Japanese, we lived right in the center of Shanghai, on the Bund, right by the river. And by that time, my parents were doing very well. He quit the consulate and became an import-export. My mother had a thriving practice, and we lived in the first high-rise, right on the river, on the Wangpu River. And it was, we had a roof garden on top. But the press club, Shanghai Press Club, had one of the 2 penthouses, and we had the other. And one of the journalists had gone to school in the United States, one of the colleges in California. And he was the correspondent for the Domei Press, which is the Japanese press agency, and one of the American papers too. And his folks were very close friends of my folks. So he would be there at the press club, and then he'd come have lunch with us. And the Japanese started bombing Shanghai about 5 days before the story that I'm going to tell you occurred. But they couldn't bomb Shanghai proper because parts of it belonged to the British and parts to the French. It was called the British concession and the French concession. And so we were safe, we were fine. They were just bombing all the work around. Where were you then?
Oh, French concession.
French concession.
No, but they bombed
But
the
they
2
were
Chinese
okay,
cities.
too.
Shanghai was governed by 3 administrations.
Yeah.
Very bizarre.
So-
You had just very quickly, international settlement, British and Americans, French concession, and the 2 Chinese cities on Chinese soil was governed by the Chinese administration.
But
3.
you never told me the story of where you were, and I'm going to tell you my
concession.
story.
I was born in the concession on the famous Yafilu.
Oh. Anyway, they were bombing all around, but not the Bund. We were perfectly safe.
Yeah.
And this journalist who worked for Domain and Washington Post, that's who he worked for. So, and his parents are very good friends of my parents. So, at the press club was there. So he always came over and had lunch with us, tea, whatever. And this particular day, they had bombed the surrounding area very badly, and the Chinese were running into, because they would be safe in the concession. And so he was having lunch at our house, and my mother was a dentist, and the penthouse also housed her dental office. So she was working, and he was there. and we could hear the bombing. And on the street, on the bund, there were all of these Chinese who were escaping and bringing their clothes and their children. They were all around us. And his cameraman, his photographer, had been killed the day before, but he had all his equipment. And he said, come on, you know how to take pictures, you're going to be my photographer. And so we ran out, and I'll show you these pictures. I took all these pictures, and we came back, and by that time my mother's patient had left, and she was looking for me, and I caught holy hell. But what that helped me do, I had the pictures, and then when I got to this country, like 3 weeks later, to Oregon, I wrote a story, and I had the pictures developed, and I got a full page in the Portland Oregonian, and it was called "I Sailed 6,000 Miles to Find Peace." And I have that article. I dug it up the other day.
You saved it.
Yeah, she came with a student visa. You see, she was able to come as a student.
And
What'd she say?
you came on a student visa, she
Student
said.
visa.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's how you first came.
Oh, yeah. But my mother did all that.
Yeah.
She was one smart cookie. What she did, the way I got into it, it's a little Baptist college, and it's still in existence. I think I have their monthly magazine there somewhere,
Oh, yeah.
Midfield College. And I had gone to the Shanghai American School, which was a school for missionary kids, and the Standard Oil people. And there were only 3 of us there who were Russian. But my mother thought that's the best school, so that's where I
It's
went.
a very good school.
Shanghai American School.
It was the
Avenue
only
Petain.
school where they taught Chinese language and Chinese history. The only school.
The
French
Shanghai
school.
American School,
Yes,
not
the
in my
others didn't
time.
bother. The German school, the French
Well,
school. No, because they
Also,
didn't care.
missionary kids. It was
Well, they were also
missionary kids.
diplomats, business people. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway,
Top school.
my mother remembered that the principal of the school I had gone to, by that time I was a junior in college, I was a big girl, but she remembered that the principal of the school when I was there was now in a little college in Oregon, little Baptist college.
Wow.
And so she called him and she said, can I get my daughter there? I want to get her out of here. And so they gave me a scholarship. And then my mother found the banks were closed, and after she got me on that ship that I was going to take that with the Japanese soldiers had been wounded, and then somehow she gathered 25 $1 American bills and put that in my purse. And then just as you said, some friends of yours took you off the ship, and where was it? My friends were in Nagasaki. They took me off the ship, and I stayed with them for a few weeks, and then they put me on a ship to America. And I came to Seattle with almost my $25 intact. I took a bus and through Portland and went to this little school. And Elin J. Anderson, who was now the president of the college, who had been the principal of the high school I went to, he got the sorority to take me in, Sigma Phi. So I had a place to stay. They gave me a job as a waitress, which I've never done before. And then he gave me a job in his office. And so that's how I made out.
And that was in 1937 you arrived here.
1937, 1938.